entire collective from DERCO, the staff of the operation. We are also welcoming South Africans who are following the proceedings of today's portfolio committee on YouTube and other platforms provided by Parliament, as part of Parliament's responsibility to make sure that South Africans participate in the democratic processes and parliamentary process of this country. Today, honorable members, as far as the ARF, African Renaissance Fund, is concerned. But before we do that, we are going to ask Lubabalo to present the entire agenda for adoption. Lubabalo. Lubabalo. How's the name?
Hello, Chairperson.
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Chairperson, we have two apologies for now, Chair. The first one is...
my request for you was to present the agenda for adoption.
Oh, okay, Chairperson. Is it visible, Chair?
Yes. That's today's agenda, honorable members. Opening and welcome, which I have done. And then the main item will be item 4, then closure. Can we have a mover for adoption of that?
Chair, I move that the agenda be adopted.
Thank you, Honorable Ngola. Seconder.
Seconded, Chair. Mamzungu. Thanks.
Bonga kakhulu, Mamzungu. Thank you very much. Honorable members, we'll now move to apologies, Lubabalo.
Thank you, Chairperson. We have two apologies, Chair. One is from the minister. She's supporting the president during the state visit of King Philip of the Belgians. And the second apology is from Deputy Minister Marsha Khodlamini. She has network problems. Deputy Minister Portes will also be joining. He just landed. And the last one is from Honorable Misho. He's still on leave, Chairperson. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. As you know, honorable members, there's a gathering in Russia of different parliaments in the African continent from the AU by invitation of the Russian Federation. We are also participating in the South Africa's parliament, represented by a delegation of both the NCOP and parliament led by our speaker. I'm sure members have taken time to look at developments in as far as interaction among the equals in the Africans, but participating in this forum in Russia is concerned. So I just thought we need to take note of that, and I hope members have followed what the speaker has said on behalf of South Africa. And one of the important things the speaker has said on behalf of the Parliament of South Africa is the importance of a multipolar world in which power is shared amongst member states. Where other member states will not be overly more powerful and dominating on other member states and nations, so that we have a better world, and in particular, a better Africa, where nations will work together to make sure that there is peace all over the world, there's development for humanity's benefit.
Excuse me,
but
the speaker sorry, Honorable Supra, but you're cutting out all the time. We cannot hear you, Honorable Supra.
The Parliament of the Republic of South Africa is for Russia to... Yes, what's wrong, Honorable Faber?
Honorable Supra,
oh, sorry
for interrupting.
I don't know, there's very little I can do with the network.
But
am I not audible to the rest of... Yes, I'm just asking if I'm not
you are breaking,
am I not audible to all of you, honorable members?
Honorable Chair, you are breaking up.
Oh, I don't know what. Okay, I'm trying to move from where I am to maybe a better place. I don't know. I'm moving around, but I'm in the city of Cape Town.
You are right, exactly where you are. You are very audible where you are as you move around.
Okay, so I'm okay here.
You are very much better there.
Yes, you are fine.
Okay. Yeah, I was saying that I'm in the city of Cape Town, so I was trying to move around to get a better connection. Members, in summary, what I was saying is that the Speaker, on behalf of the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, is participating in a forum that is taking place in Russia, where the different African states have come together, hosted by President Putin and the Parliament, the Duma of Russia, to exchange views on how relations can be strengthened in order to make sure that we achieve a just world, a world where there's peace, a world where there's development for everybody, and in particular, a world in which the role that must be played by the African continent is recognized and respected by everybody. A world in which, like the Security Council, there's a representation that will reflect the entirety of the world, and a world in which a multipolar perspective is developed and adhered to by everybody. So what I was saying earlier on is that members must just develop interest in those developments that are taking place in Russia, in which the Duma is hosting other parliaments from the African continent, but also the meeting that took place or taking place between the president of Russia and the president of the Russian Federation, President Putin. But also the developments that are taking place in the African continent, including some of the challenges that have arisen as a consequence of elections taking place in Nigeria. So we hope that members can follow some of those developments and all other elections that are going to be taking place in the African continent this year. And we hope all of them can be peaceful and can go well, so that the African child can one day overcome the Afro-pessimism that is there in some parts of the world. The main item we are going to be dealing with today somehow has got a relationship with some of the matters I have raised. And that is the matter about the African Renaissance Fund, its projects, and the impact of those projects. As I did earlier on, I welcome DG Dango on behalf of the collective from DERCO. So I'm now going to hand over to the DG because I don't see the deputy ministers as being among the attendees here today. So without wasting time, DG Dango, over to you.
Good morning, Honorable Chair. Good morning, honorable members. You've given a lengthy introduction, Chair, so I'm going to not waste more time with introductions. I do think that, you know, the ARF remains an important tool of South Africa's foreign policy, particularly when we speak about soft power. The ARF projects are generally multi-year in nature. So in the presentation, we'll give members a sense of the 10 active projects that are currently underway, but also some of the projects from 2019 to date, as has been the request. Honorable Chair and honorable members, if I may, I'd like to ask Mr. Daniel Bassetere from the ARF Secretariat to lead us on the presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, DG, senior member of the department. I'll be taking you through the presentation of the project of the ARF, which have been completed since 2019 as requested by the committee. Zooming straight into it, I will start with the mandate and the objective of the ARF. The African Renaissance and International Cooperation Fund was established in terms of Section 2, subsection 1 of the African Renaissance and International Cooperation Fund Act number 51 of 2000. It's under the leadership of Minister of DERCO and under the control of Deputy Director General of the department. The following are the objectives of the ARF, and anyone who is applying for the assistance in terms of the ARF fund must be in line with the following areas or objective of the Act. Number one, the fund has been established to enhance cooperation between the Republic of South Africa and other countries, in particular African countries, as well as to promote democracy and good governance. It also assists in terms of prevention and resolution of conflicts. It also assists in terms of socioeconomic development and integration, provision of humanitarian assistance, as well as human resource development. Moving on to the project which we have completed thus far, we have a project called Humanitarian Assistance to the Republic of South Sudan. Basically, the project was meant for the provision of humanitarian assistance to the Republic of South Sudan, and it was basically meant for the positive role which the South African was trying to provide to the Republic of South Sudan after the conflict there. So an amount of total of 100 million has been allocated for this project. The project was initiated in 2017, and 100 million was allocated for this project. And the following items were procured and delivered to the Republic of South Sudan in Juba. And they were subsequently delivered to the areas where the people who were displaced were, so that they can be able to have the food items. And the food items were packaged as follows. We had delivered 1,625 metric tons of non-genetically modified sweet sorghum packaged in 12.5 kg, 130 metric tons of iodinated salt packaged in 1 kg, 1,300 metric tons of non-genetically modified red kidney beans packed in 10 kgs. We also have 185 metric tons of pure sunflower cooking oil. And all these were delivered to South Sudanese to make sure that they have full meal to the displaced persons. South African service provider was appointed to deliver this project to ensure that commodity are purchased in South Africa. And we have a saving of 25.2 million in this particular project, which was redirected to the other new project. Then the second project was a project which we were providing humanitarian assistance to the Republic of Zimbabwe. A member of the committee will know that we had a cyclone Idai which hit Mozambique and the eastern part of Zimbabwe. And the affected part of Zimbabwe, it was mostly the eastern part, of which the area it was Chipinge, Chimanimani, Buhera, Bikita, Mutare, Gutu, and Chirezi. A total of 270,000 people were affected, and a total amount of 50 million has been allocated for this project, and that was in 2019. A South African service provider was appointed to deliver this project, and we delivered a total of 450,000 maize meal packed in 12.5 to Zimbabwe, and consequently subsequently distributed to the areas which I've just mentioned above. The next project is the African Women in Dialogue. The objective of the project was basically cooperation between the Republic of South Africa and other countries, in particular African countries. Chairperson, you will know that, and the other members of the committee, in Africa, the face of poverty is a woman's face, as more than 80% of people living in absolute poverty are women. Women are also the main victims of wars and violence and conflicts. Whilst these women of Africa share common experience, there is no platform for them to share this experience and help support their healing, development, and upliftment. Giving women a voice at a continental dialogue level goes a long way in helping them to realize that they are not alone in the struggle. The project was started in 2019, and the amount of 37.6 million was allocated for this project. And we have an annual 5-day African Women Dialogue, which was conducted here in South Africa. A total of 1,000 women who visited South Africa for the biannual forum visited the country. And basically, most of them were the women from the country who were heavily impacted by war, displacement, and deprivation of all these other aspects of life, issues of disability, discrimination, and disabilities. The project has been completed, and we had a saving of 25.4 million, which was also redirected and reprioritized to the new projects. The next project was the deployment of South African experts to Juba, South Sudan, to serve on the Independent Boundaries Committee, IBC. The objective of the project was for the provision of the prevention and resolution of conflict in the south of Sudan. As you know, that there have been some conflict in the area after the establishment of that particular state. The South African was leading the resolution facilitation in the area, and they, as a country, we felt that it's important to support this particular area, so that there should be, and there will be a resolution of conflict in the area. A total of 1 million has been allocated for the project in 2019, And the report in terms of the boundaries which were being done in the south and in South Sudan has been submitted to IGAD, and the capacity as well in terms of IBCT to execute the important mandate through the provision of high-level individual has been completed, and the project has been completed so far. Then moving on to the next project, which we have completed, is the presidential and legislative election in the Central African Republic, that's CAR. Basically, we were supporting their election in terms of legislative and presidential election. A total amount of 18.5 million has been allocated for this project, and goods and all items to support the project were purchased through the IEC as the expert in terms of election here in South Africa, and the goods were transported to the Central African Republic in Bangui, and the elections were conducted on the 27th of December 2020. The election was successful and declared free and fair. The next project was South Africa's contribution to the Special COVID Fund. We all know that we had this pandemic since 2019. It was basically meant for the humanitarian assistance to the African continent, and the total amount of 72.7 million has been allocated for these purposes, and South Africa has contributed immensely to the fight against COVID-19 in the African Union. We also had contributed to the Center for African Disease Control to fight against the COVID-19. As you know, that there have been various forums, various funds which were administered in Addis. So South Africa has also contributed in this aspect as we were providing humanitarian assistance. A total of 36.3 million has been allocated for this particular project, and that was back in 2021. And the project has been since completed since 2020 and 2021 respectively. Then we tried to contribute as South Africans to fight against the COVID-19. Moving on to the next project, we as the South African and ARF, we have also assisted the Republic of Eswatini with the humanitarian assistance, and the Kingdom of Eswatini made a request to the government of South Africa to be assisted with issues of El Nino across Eswatini in 2016. In 2016, around October, a total of 40 million has been allocated to this project. And the project was meant to assist orphans and vulnerable children in different neighbor care points. The beneficiaries were between the ages of 3 to 5 years. The project was meant to cover 52,000 beneficiaries. And we have done the project together with the World Food Program, and one of the aspects which the World Food Program has done was to assist in terms of developing the small scale farmers to the commercial farmers so that they be able to assist in that particular level and just upgrade them in terms of their skills as well, so that they will be able to penetrate the market at that level. Moving on to the next project, which we have completed, is the In Transformation Initiative, that's ITI. In this particular project, we were assisting the Central African Republic with the post-conflict resolution. And the amount which has been allocated for this particular project was 8.1 million. The project was started back in 2018 December, and the ITI was the facilitator and supporting all the institution in CAR with the process of advising technical support and capacity building to the various local institutions that have been charged with the implementation and reconciliation and transitional justice aspects of peace in the Republic. And basically that brings us to the end of the presentation. Perhaps one maybe would just indicate that currently we have 10 projects which are underway, and yeah, they are still on implementation. Yeah, basically that's it. Thank you, Chairperson.
Any addition, DG?
No, thank you, Chair. I think we can engage with some of the issues that may emerge from questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, DG and your team for the presentation. Members, we will now take hands for participation. We will start with Honorable Bergman.
Chair, thanks very much. Just in terms of the presentation and listening to what's going on in certain countries in Africa, where we've got one president wanting to go for a third term, another country that's, dare I say, going to outlaw homosexuality. I think what we need to do is maybe use
I didn't hear, sorry, you got cut on our Bergman. Can you just repeat? Start from the beginning.
Chair, so what I'm saying is, with what's happening in Africa, some of the limitations that we've stated that are taking place in Africa. Sorry, there's a golf cart that's coming here. Maybe what we should do with the ARF is start becoming use it as a little bit of a political tool as well. There should be conditions attached. We're seeing certain countries now, especially when it comes post-COVID, presidents wanting to run a third term, countries wanting to change their constitution to outlaw homosexuality. And maybe what we need to do is, when we engage in projects, we need to use the ARF as a political tool, number one. Number two, in the same vein, we haven't had a proper meeting with the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs. And judging by this report and some of the other reports, maybe it's an opportune time for us to actually schedule at least once, and if not on a quarterly basis, or maybe once 3 times a year, is to actually have a joint meeting with Home Affairs. A lot of our missions actually rely on the processing of documents through Home Affairs, or on the staff of Home Affairs. And a lot of the legislation that they're passing actually has an impact on international relations. And I'm just wondering whether it wouldn't be opportune for us as a committee to actually have a joint session with them, as I say, at least once, if not 3 times a year. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Honorable Bergman.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let us indeed welcome and appreciate the presentation on ARF. Chair, I think the first 2 things I need to commend and appreciate from the presentation is that the concerted effort to ensure that in all these projects, if not almost all, the concerted effort to use South African service providers and the concerted effort to ensure that procurement of goods is done in South Africa, except where it is extremely not possible. Chair, there's an issue about an expert that was to serve in the IPC and all that and all that. I say that there is, I think it was 1 million plus that was used in that regard. So all I would like to check is how long was the duration for this aspect to serve in the IPC. Lastly, Chair, I see that in some of the years you have got about 3 projects. In some of the years you've got only 1 project. So I want to check that what factors influence how many projects do we do per financial year or per year? Because it is my belief that in Africa on daily basis, humanitarian support is always a need. So what factors do influence that in this 2017 with 1, 2018 with 3, 2019 with 2, and all that and all that? What are these factors that influence that? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Honorable Ngola. Honorable Fava.
Good morning, Chairperson and all members and staff of DIRCO. Chairperson, yes, I've asked just on our previous meeting on this ARF that I did not see anything on Cuba. Now, this is since this report says from 2019 till today. That's 4 years. Now, Chairperson, it cannot be that we are funding Cuba with projects for so many years. And since 2019 to 2023, which is 4 years, there is not one project finished in this part. And we do know that there is a lot of money that has been given to Cuba. I would like to have clarity on that, Chairperson. How it can be that there is no results in any project finished in this 4 years. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Honorable Fava. Honorable Skumbuzo Mpanza.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning, colleagues from the Portfolio Committee, and welcome the presentation from the department as delegated by DG to the presenter. And also greetings to South Africans, as you have said earlier on, Chairperson. Chair, I will ask a very silly question. Pardon me, Chair. My question is that where is South Africa as a country? Is it not in Africa, part of the African continent? Chair, the reason why I'm asking this thing, I know, as I've said, that it might be a silly question, that because if you want to assist other people, you must assist people outside, your neighbors and people in other continents, starting in Africa and going to other continents, as Honorable Faber is asking about the Cuba one. But Chair, what I know in life, even legislation is not cast in stone and is not forever. That is why we always have sessions in Parliament where legislation is repealed and is reviewed. Because I see the work of the ARF is very good in African countries, and there are even sometimes savings. But Chair, in our own doorstep here in South Africa, we've had a lot of challenges, floods, ravaging people and destroying people's houses. Even at this point in time, the majority of those people, particularly in those provinces that were affected, they're still living in squalor conditions, things that really undermine their human dignity as people. So now we will also have the ARF migrating, which is something that we are asking that at least by the end of our term, we should have that legislation being passed by Parliament and signed by the President, that migration of ARF to SAPTA. So, Chair, can't we then, because they always say charity begins at home, even if our intention is externally based, because it's based on the act, how the act was crafted, whether it could also take into consideration in looking also our own country should also be beneficiary to this kind of very good work that is done to neighboring countries and countries abroad. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thanks, Honorable Mbanza. Austembi.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. Chair, I was hoping I didn't hear you properly on your opening remarks, I think because of the network. But as a committee, Chair, we need to also look at the role of the International Criminal Court, which South Africa is a member of. And I remember a few years back, while the former President Jacob Zuma was still president, as a country, we looked at terminating or withdrawing from this International Criminal Court because of its injustices and this body being used as a political tool to benefit the few. And as a country, I think we see now where this thing is going, where the criminal court is now issuing a warrant of arrest for the president of Russia. And I think as South Africa, we need to strongly advocate for African countries who are going to be used by the Europeans, by the Americans, to play political football through such bodies that African member states are members of and are affiliated to. So I would strongly recommend that, Chair, maybe if we can be guided and be told how far is that process of South Africa removing its membership from the ICC, as things are getting worse instead of getting better with such bodies, and there is no transformation in these bodies. Secondly, Chair, I wanted to check who does and how are the budgets done of this ARF, because if you look at it, when we came in 2019, there was an allocation to that Zanele Mbeki Foundation, which is presented here as a Woman in Dialogue, of 37 million, and only 12 million got used and 25 million was then further diverted to other projects. So it means that money gets allocated to a certain project until after the project is done, and then they see, okay, we've only used 12 million, then let's divert. How are the budgets done in order for them to allocate the funds to that particular project? Was the money that was not used in most of the projects that were presented here and diverted to other projects due to a failure of the projects? So we had allocated 37 million thinking that we'll have more than 1,000 women, and then only 1,000 came. That's why the funds were not fully utilized. So how are the budgets done, and how do we measure success of all these contributions that we are making and assistance that we are giving? And then lastly, Chair, what assistance is South Africa now giving to Malawi and Mozambique and Madagascar regarding the floods, Cyclone Freddy, which just happened currently? And how does the African continent as a whole look at early warning measures that can assist us as an African country? Because especially the ones on the coastal lines, I think with this climate change, we are going to be facing more and more fatal disasters. And I don't think as a country, we have enough scientists and people that can look, or we do, but we don't provide enough resources and attention to our scientists so that they can assist in determining and, you know, preventing, or even, you know, being able. You can see also with the thing of COVID, we had to rely mostly on the West to assist us with medication and science and research. So as South Africa, we need to start advocating in the AU, in all African bodies, that we need to enhance and capacitate our science and research department in the African continent. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Austemi. From my side, honorable members, I just want to check with the department regarding the 2021 budget, which among other things sought to achieve the operationalization of the Africa Continent Free Trade Agreement, which was going to, among others, eliminate tariffs and so on. It does look like that was not proceeded with, or it did not achieve its intended objective. So what may have been the problem there? Second issue, I hold a very strong view that for Africa to play a much meaningful impact role internationally, one day it must become a country, right? Which will be more powerful, and we can be at the level of India, the US, and Russia, China, and so on. Now, from a research point of view, is it possible for the African Renaissance Fund to be used to do a study which will involve the states and non-states role players, people, and so on, to look at the possibility of exploring Africa becoming a country beyond what the AU is doing? There are very strong elements that can be taken from the AU, in my view, that can help us progress towards having Africa as one country. For me, it's very simple, because you simply have to make it like Brazil, where it's federal states. And the current existing 54 countries will then become states on their own. Then you will have elections taking place to elect both the president and the cabinet of the African continent, without necessarily doing away with the existing countries. And you just have to change somehow constitutions, policy there and there. And then we can become a powerful force. So I just want to check if such research can be explored so that it can be presented to the AU and other ancillary bodies, which can help us achieve that strategic objective. Because if we continue to keep Africa as fragmented as it is, it's easier for, in my view, for those with financial interest in the African continent, like they are doing now, to finance and fund conflict. so that we are perpetually in conflict and we are unable to work as one unit. And as conflict ensues, to strengthen their muscles to then implement Western imperialism, which Western imperialism in the ultimate end will not just weaken the African continent, but will annihilate it ultimately if, for instance, we don't produce sufficient number of future revolutionaries as the African continent. So that's my second issue. The third one is how do we identify these projects in which we get to participate through the ARF? Does it come from states or parliaments or individuals or corporations? Is there a body within the department which then receives them, assesses them, and then make a determination as to which projects will be not funded, which ones will be funded? The last question is on other international bodies, particularly funding bodies, whether you don't think it might be important for you to approach them so that they can also make a contribution to ARF. And if ARF cannot be elevated to become an AU thing, instead of just being a South African thing, where member states within the African continent attached to the AU, we can all contribute, so that there must be no hope that one day you will not have ARF. It must actually be strengthened, it must be grown, it must become bigger, it must become more efficient, and it shouldn't just become a South Africa state. So in the operations of the AU, in my view, we could explore that possibility, working with other international funding organizations which wants to see us getting rid of Afro-pessimism and Afrophobia. Over to you, DG, and your team.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and honorable members. I'll try to go through some of the questions, and then also there's some specifics which my colleagues will assist with. But let me just start with the suggestion by Honorable Bergman on the approaches to soft power in relation to particular areas where the ARF can play a role. You'll see in the presentation that some of the categories of support ranges from humanitarian assistance to I think the national guidelines on humanitarian assistance is generally should be no conditionalities or no string of our support, for example, of the democracy and governance work. I do think that it's a fair consideration for us to look at. You may not always be funding or working through other governments. You may be working through civil society or through technical experts. And I think there is the opportunity to use our soft power strategically to shape some of the agendas that we think are important from our own national interest perspective. So I do think that's it's a very important consideration for us to look at it, similarly to the kind of issues that the chair has just raised. Chair, on the, I think there's been a comment around the joint meetings with portfolio committees. I think that's more for the members to decide upon, but I do think that it's a very important one. Home Affairs plays an incredibly important for ourselves what they're doing. We may have problems, policies that either enables the growth of the economy, enables the Africa free trade, you know, an environment on our portfolio committee meeting. I think the second set of questions emerged from Honorable Ngola, and I think it's about the budgets available. I do think, Chair, so similarly to Honorable Mpanza asked a similar set of questions. So SATPA is essentially demand driven. So at the moment, the way in which projects are funded is that if there's a humanitarian crisis, we'll get a note verbal from a country requesting assistance. The desks will then engage with setting up the projects. The projects are then presented to the RF committee, which is comprised of both DIRCO staff members, chaired by the DG of DIRCO, and also National Treasury. And based on the discussions of this committee, proposals are then forwarded to both ministers to concur, because the rules are that projects are only finance and DIRCO. So this is the manner in which the budget takes place. The allocation is some detailed plan has to be, and if it's multi, we'll find multi-year planning. What ARF will require is detailed plans, and that's why, for example, you ask, for example, why?
Sorry, Chair.
Some cases you find that the it's essentially based on.
I'm just saying your network in Pretoria is failing you now.
Oh, my apologies. Should I start over again?
Not all over again, but slightly where you were at the point where you were talking about the committee talking to Treasury, then submission to the minister and so on.
Sure. I think, yeah, Chair, I think there I was making the comment about projects are approved based on concurrence, and it's also generally demand driven. And that's why, for example, you'll find some years you'll have one project, and some years you might have 2 or 3 projects initiated. It all depends on the requests and the demands that comes from other countries generally. So it is demand driven. Just on that, Chair, if I may, that within SATPA and with the establishment of SATPA, we're also thinking of the extent we should become more proactive and not only be dependent on requests, particularly in our non-humanitarian components of our support. Chair, on the issues that Honorable Faber raised on Cuba, I'm going to ask my colleague, Mr. Basseterre, just to go into the details of that. So we don't have any humanitarian projects for Cuba, but there is a loan agreement, and the loan agreement is multi-year. And I'm going to ask my colleague just to talk about what are the kinds of issues that the Cuban government has spent the loan money on, but also the repayment schedules and those kinds of issues. But there's no, on the issues raised by Honorable Mpanza, the ARF Act and also the allocation is essentially for work outside of the continent, outside of the country, particularly for African countries, but in some cases also for non-African countries. So the budgets for the ARF is essentially allocated specifically for work to be done outside of the national borders, with the exception of how we can procure the goods that we send outside. So we do think that with respect to the need to allocate more resources for some of the key needs in the domestic front, that those allocations should be looked at from, departments such as social development that deals with the disaster management, and obviously more allocations to those kinds of established funds within national government is something that we would support as well. Chair, there's a number of issues that Honorable Msani raised. I touched on the aspect of who does the budgeting, just to confirm again that the budgeting, the allocation of the budgets are done based on the project proposals that are presented to the ARF committee. But you will find that based on the actual programs of work, that funding is only allocated for very specific outcomes from the ARF. So some of it may be completed well in advance. Some of it may be a fact that the projects were not completed in time, but we wouldn't be able to fund further in the absence of detailed project plans. But Mr. Basseterre can add on that. Chair, on the issues of the ICC, I do think we may need a separate session of the portfolio committee to deal with that. It's a quite a lengthy and technical discussion. Suffice to say that South Africa withdrew, the Department of Justice withdrew the International Crimes Bill 2 weeks ago from Parliament, and that was in line with the decision that South Africa would not withdraw from the ICC, based on various reasons. I think we can discuss that in a more detailed manner, if you may, Chair, at another session of the committee. Thanks, Chair. I think on the, just a quick one on the, Honorable Nsani did raise the issues of life-saving medication. This is not a project that we're presenting on here today, but I mean, we have funded, we're in the process of supporting a hub in South Africa. It's a vaccine manufacturing hub, but it's also a global hub where the IP developed will be shared with other African countries and developing countries. So the security of supply agenda was part of why this particular project is currently being supported. Chair, on your comments on the AFC FTA, I'm going to ask Mr. Basseterre to comment on the status of that project. But again, the support of inter-African trade and the AFC FTA, the role that plays is something that we find is important. Whether that was, the ARF can play a broader role in that will also depend on the request that will be coming for us from the Secretariat in Ghana. Chair, on the other matters that you have raised on the idea, I think, of a United States of Africa, again, I do think that is a discussion that perhaps we would need to be led by some kind of concept note. It may not be specific to the ARF. It could be a more broader discussion on the role of South Africa, Africa, and the AU, and what are the prospects of moving beyond where the Union is now. But I do think that's another detailed discussion that we should be having. Chair, just on the other development agencies that you raised, we as the DIRCO and the ARF, we are engaging with other development finance institutions that are similar to us. This week, one of the ARF Secretariat members is in a meeting in Europe where they're meeting with other development finance institutions to look at how do we ensure that aid is better directed, better packaged. We will also then look at how do we improve the ARF as at this stage, the only African development finance institution that is government-led. There are development finance institutions from within the private sector, and this is to be distinguished, for example, from the multilateral lending bodies. But there is, interestingly, discussions that are taking place on aligning with the best practices globally on how an institution like the ARF, as it becomes SACPA, can be better managed and be better targeted on the issues, on the areas of importance. Chair, I think I've covered some of the issues there. Yes, apologies. Laura just pointing out to me that there was a question on Malawi and Mozambique, given the current disaster there. We're having a ARF meeting tomorrow, in fact today, and the committee to look at a proposal to support Malawi. There's been a formal request from Malawi. We have reached out to the Mozambicans, but there's been no formal request from the Mozambicans as yet. That may come in the next couple of days or so, but we are looking at using the ARF to support them in this particular time of need. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to hand over, if you don't mind, to my colleague, Mr. Basateri, on specifically the loan approach to Cuba. And then also, if you can comment on the projects related to the AFC FTA, if you at all.
Oh, thank you, DG. Just perhaps maybe to start off with, it will be an issue, CTA, African Continental Agreement. We will have, we have received a proposal which will be tabled this afternoon when we have our quarterly ARF Advisory Committee meeting, wherein they will be requesting funds to facilitate issue of cross-border, easy cross-border. And I think the project is in line with the issue of African or continental integration, which will be in line with this particular aspect, and I think it will come handy. But with regards to the issue of the loan, the Cuba loan was initiated way back in 2008. However, the whole process of formalizing it was completed in 2018, and South Africa managed to sit down together with the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition and have an economic package to help Cuba in this aspect, of which the package was at a total amount of 350 million, which was detailed in terms of a plan on how to disburse the funds. It was in terms of the grant of 40 million, which was meant to, that was facility A, which was meant to purchase the seeds, which were eyed or planned to be purchased here in South Africa. Then the facility has been completed, and all the goods were purchased here in South Africa and the other part of the world. Then moving on to facility B, we have a solidarity grant of 100 million, of which goods were also purchased in South African market. Under this facility, we have a lot of South African company, which goods have been purchased from Techman South Africa, Diesel, DBZ Diesel Parts, SG Batman, Techman South Africa. Yeah, those are the companies which the money has spent on, and the total amount which has been spent in that particular facility was 14 million. Then we also had a facility C, which is a loan aspect in this facility. That particular loan, it's a credit in any way, which is a total of 210 million, of which the first tranche was 70 million for the Cuban to access the 140 in terms of the agreement. The first 70 million was fully repaid, and in terms of the agreement, they are now accessing 140 million, of which they are busy paying. We have received the first payment in June end of last year, and the other payment was also done in December. So they are adhering to the terms and conditions of the agreement. Basically, in terms of the facility of the Cuba loan facility and how it's being implemented, in a nutshell, that's how the facility is going. And I think we are having a very good relation with the Cuban with regards to the way in which they are responding in terms of repaying the loans and how the agreement is being implemented. I think in a nutshell, that's what I can say. Thank you, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you very much, DG and your team. It doesn't look like any of the deputy ministers has joined us. So we will want to thank you, honorable members. We are agreeing to the proposal that we must facilitate a meeting between ourselves and Home Affairs, as suggested by Honorable Bergman.
Sorry, Chair, I have connected, but I find a meeting in the middle. I'm sorry.
Oh, how's Candice? Sorry. I didn't see you here. Thanks for joining the meeting. Thank you very much, DM. So, honorable members, we will try and facilitate that meeting between ourselves and Home Affairs. And I also think that linked to that, we must add departments that deal with the economy, whether it's tourism or other departments, so that we don't discuss international relations separate from the international economy. So we'll facilitate that meeting. I think it's important. There was also a proposal by Honorable Mpanza, which was in a form of a question. I don't know whether it was responded to, DG, that South Africa is part of the African continent, and are we having projects, ARF related in South Africa? If we don't have, why not? And there was a suggestion that if we don't have, and maybe it's because of the law, we must have such projects. I don't know whether before we close, you will want to respond to that matter. There was an issue raised on the ICC by Honorable Msani. Honorable Msani, what we will do, we will follow up that matter and come back to the committee about the ICC, its posture, particularly to leadership of the member states located within the African continent and other developing countries, and the decision which was taken some time back when President Zuma was still the state president to commence a process to dismember ourselves from the ICC. I'm not sure how far we are with that process. So we will check it unless the department is able to update us now on that particular matter. Before we close, DG, I don't know if I didn't listen properly, but the matter that was raised by Honorable Mpanza, you can just clarify it quickly.
Is that
the matter of South Africa being part of the African continent?
Yeah. So what I suggested, Chair, is that as the ARF is currently structured and also with SATPA, the mandate is essentially to use the funds allocated to DIRCO for use outside of our national borders, essentially on the areas and the categories whether it's humanitarian assistance, democracy, and governance. We do know that there's enormous need in the country as well, but we would suggest that should be a function of allocations to national departments such as social development and other departments where there are funds for dealing with domestic humanitarian crisis issues, but also some of the development financing issues at the domestic level. It may not be useful at this stage, Chair, but it's something for further discussion to have the allocating of funds to SATPA for domestic use, because the allocations do not generally work that way. But essentially, I think there is a case to be made for more funding to the institutions from the national fiscus that deal with humanitarian crises at the domestic level, but also some of the development needs. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. ICC.
Thanks, Chair. I think on that one as well, I had suggested that we do need to have a longer meeting on that one. I did mention the fact that the International Crimes Bill was withdrawn from Parliament by the Department of Justice about 2 or 3 weeks ago. That was based on the decision that South Africa would no longer withdraw from the ICC, together with most other African countries where there's a decision not to withdraw. I think the only country that indicated withdrawal was Burundi. So I do think that we need to have a longer discussion on the ICC, the role that it plays, and the current crisis. But I do think that it's just a short version of what is required from a longer discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. DM, thank you very much for leading the team and the DG to account to the Portfolio Committee. Members of the Portfolio Committee for your participation. The DERCO itself in its totality. South Africans who followed the proceedings of this Portfolio Committee from 10 o'clock on the projects relating to ARF. So thanks very much for coming, and honorable members will meet this afternoon in Parliament. Thank you very much. The meeting is officially closed.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Sure.
Danko Slalo.